evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Split Cafe. What's going on, Matt? How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. And we got we got Johanna Amaro on this week, so I'm excited, you know.
Yeah,
I can't wait to talk about mental wellness and mental health with Johanna.
yeah. Thank you for joining us, Joanna. Everyone, Joanna is from Palms Behavioral Health. Joanna, why don't you give us a quick little introduction and a little rundown of your credentials and what we're going to be discussing today?
Yes, of course. Um, like y'all mentioned, my name is Johanna. I am a therapist at Palms Behavioral Health, where I currently practice inpatient therapy with our patients that are there. I hold a LPC associate and a LCDC intern while I practice there. I am also currently going to school for rehabilitation counseling, which is my area of interest. And part of the reasons why I ended up in Palms was because mental health was something that was not in my area of expertise. So going into mental health opened up my eyes into a lot of things, and now I'm also implementing that with my future endeavors as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thanks for joining us. So go ahead and get started. Let's give
So
us a topic and let's run
let me
down.
let me ask you this. Let me before you kind of why mental health? Like my why mental wellness? Like, obviously there was something that sparked you to where that curiosity and that flame, you know, um, was burning. So why? Why? I guess that's what I want to know. Why mental wellness?
Good question.
And it's funny how I ended up in mental health. As part of my PhD program, I was required to do hours in mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I never saw myself doing any type of mental health counseling. I was more on the vocational side, looking
Okay.
at the quality of life of individuals with disabilities. But one of the things that I saw a lot when I was working with individuals with disabilities and trying to help them reach their full potential was these mental health issues that came across with a lot of them depression, anxiety, and some of them had ADHD, they had autism. So when it came to helping them, some of these mental health issues were coming up as barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really opened up my mind into being more involved with mental health was when I started my internship at Palms. I saw a different side of mental health, not just depression, anxiety. I got to see other disorders like schizophrenia,
Mm-hmm.
schizoaffective, bipolar disorders, personality disorders. And it just started this whole new interest in,
Mm-hmm.
well, if I really understand the things that go on with an individual's mental health, then
Mm-hmm.
I can bridge that gap when it comes to helping them if it turns into a disability to the point where
Mm-hmm.
they're not able to function due to their mental health.
Wow.
So this is where I'm at now. And that's one of the reasons why I am now very interested in mental health and bringing that awareness to others, since it does have a big stigma.
Oh, it
In
does.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
does. I have, I have members in my family, my immediate family. I've shared this story before where my son plays college basketball, and um, there's a lot of stresses that some people don't understand. Being an athlete at a collegiate level, there are stresses, right? And so my son had to take a break last year because he needed to find outlets and ways to cope, with anxiety and with his mental health, right? And kudos to him because he's 20 years old and he recognized that there was something that he needed help with. He asked me, he called me. He's like, "Dad, when you played, did you did you ever get like panic attacks and anxiety attacks and so forth? And I was honest with him. I said, son, I played so long ago. it was it was kind of something that it wasn't a hot button word. It was just kind of something that we all kind of went through as
There
athletes,
was
and
a
we just
stigma around it at that time, even a
yeah, there
more
was a
stigma, right?
stigma, and there wasn't a lot of knowledge around it either. It's just like, okay, you're having a bad day, or you got to deal with it. And so I told him, I said, yeah, I did, but I didn't have resources like people do now. And so the one thing I asked him was, okay, is it bad enough to where you want to end your days, like in your life? He was like, no. And I was like, okay, then we can conquer anything. We can get you, whatever. Long story short, he's doing great. He transferred schools, and he's flourishing right now, and he still speaks with his therapist. But it's definitely something that is needed, and it's warranted. And I just want to give you your flowers, because you're doing God's work, and you're helping so many people.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree. So, Joanna, I know off camera you had mentioned, and I'm kind of glad Matt brought up his son, because off camera you mentioned mental health and mental health awareness in the youth. So let's talk about that. I mean, we already segued into that. So, what is mental health for youth? What is a mental health awareness for the youth? Talk to us about that.
So as we've seen, there's a lot of things that youth go through. One of them is puberty. Their hormones is a big change. Some of them start experiencing a big change where they start having depressive thoughts, where they start questioning their identity. They start going through these things that cause a distress to them. And due to some of that stigma that exists, they're scared to talk about it, to bring
Mm-hmm.
it up to someone like, hey, I'm thinking, I'm having these thoughts, and automatically people put a label on it. Oh, you're depressed. Like you're going to be like this for the rest of your life. And that's not the case. There are signs or warning signs that we can identify and say, hey, you know what? Like, yeah, maybe those thoughts shouldn't be happening as often as they are. Have you talked to someone about it? Or is
Mm-hmm.
this is the first time that you're reaching out about what you're feeling? But it becomes an issue because then if a youth tells somebody else, and it goes on and it spreads through the school, saying like, oh, this person is cutting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's going, or he or she will get bullied for it. So even worse, they are not going to talk about it. And sometimes in different school districts, some individuals try not to get involved because they don't know how to
Yeah.
approach the students. So what they do is they send them off to the counselor.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that is their solution. That's not what I deal with. Send them off to the counselor. The
Yeah.
counselor will deal with that. And as we know, counselors are not just counselors for the students, they have administrative roles as well. And it's one counselor for however many students are
Hundreds of
that are.
students.
Exactly. There's so many students out there for just one counselor that is not, it's not feasible, or it's not
Yeah. It's
something that
definitely
can
not
be
a, it's not a system that is what is the word I'm looking for? It's not beneficial to the student, because they're in this kind of system. It's not the admin's fault. It's
done.
just a numbers game, and so it's definitely it's
Well,
unfortunate.
and you said it too, that they get sent to a counselor, and I don't know about you guys, but in my school, the counselor was mainly there for like college prep and getting us going for the college side of things. And I mean, they were there for like some sort of talk to talk or have someone to vent to, but for the most part, they were there for like helping us get to college. So they're not. It doesn't seem like they'd get the proper help at that point.
Yes, and sometimes the students are scared to disclose such information because parents will get called right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is something that I've seen with the patients that we see in our hospital, that no, nobody listens to me. If I go tell someone, they automatically tell my parents, and my parents don't understand. So there we go again, the awareness of, what it is that the youth are going through, how parents can listen. Matt had mentioned earlier, it's you're just having a bad day, deal with it. But how
Mhm.
are they supposed to deal with it
Yeah,
if they're not?
if they don't have the tools to even begin to cope or deal or organize their thoughts or whatever it is, like they don't have those resources to know what exactly to do to deal with said issue, And so, yeah.
At Palms Behavioral Health, we understand the journey to mental wellness. Our dedicated team offers personalized care for adolescents, adults, and seniors. We focus on individualized treatment plans, addressing a wide range of mental health needs. Our evidence-based practices and trauma-informed care ensure sensitive and effective treatment. Palms Behavioral Health, healing minds, empowering lives. Contact us today.
And that's where, we have this cycle where students start having these symptoms. They don't talk about them. They become worse to the point where they end up having a crisis. And then, they end up being hospitalized, or they end up even worse, they stop being here. So
Yeah.
part of that awareness is educating, not only the school administrators, but even the parents and the family, like, hey, mental health is here, it's real. We're
Yep.
not saying that you have to accept it, but at least hear out, what are some of the warning signs? What are some of the symptoms before it becomes too late?
I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm all for mental health and, being an advocate. We've done this show. This is our second season now. We've had so many doctors on and clinicians and the question I have for you is how can you tell that a teen is just really having issues, right? And needs, proper help or they are just trying to get attention or being, quote unquote drama queens to capture said attention. How do you differentiate between the two? And you're like, no, this kid doesn't really need help. He just needs, you know. I'm curious to know how you can differentiate between the two.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It is a good question, and this is something that we do a lot with our job, because we can tell when someone really needs the help, and there's others where it's just that attention-seeking behavior, which, if it's not addressed at an early age, can become into a personality disorder once
Of
they're
course,
older.
yeah.
So some of the things that we do notice is with individuals that do need the help, they show symptoms of distress. They minimize their symptoms because they don't want you to know what's going on. They mask it so well to the point where you have to catch them slip in their symptoms, in their behaviors. For example, if you know the person, let's say a student at school,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of know what their baseline is in terms of their behavior. If they're
Mm-hmm.
talkative, if they hang out with their friends, if they go to lunch, if they turn in their homework, if they, ask questions in class, and then you start noticing that they're not engaged anymore, that they're kind of getting distracted with things around in the classroom. They don't ask that much questions. You don't see them hanging out with the same group of friends. You see that, they linger around on their own more. Those are signs where someone should approach and be like, hey, what's going on? I've seen you a little bit distracted lately.
Yeah. But how do you like, and you bring up a really great point, and all these are signs, right? But how do you know that there isn't some sort of growth happening?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to play devil's advocate and
No,
trying to,
no, that's fine.
but how do the friends that I had in middle school were not the friends that I had in high school, you know? And at some point there was a break. There was like, okay, I'm running in a new circle, they're running in new circles, like we're still cool, but I'm not running with you guys because I'm not into what you guys are doing or whatever, good, bad, whatever. But there's growth. I took the point where I'm like, I don't want to hang around people that don't advance me, or you know what I'm saying? So how do you know it's not, they're just like, hey, this group isn't who I need
Just
to
not
hang out with?
maturing.
Yeah, maturing is probably the best way to put it. Thanks, Chris. Like, how do you know there's just not a maturity aspect to it?
You can tell it's a maturity aspect of it if they're still thriving and they still keep their same behavior.
True.
So if, for example, I was the type of person that would constantly change between group of friends. I
Mm-hmm.
had friends who were very athletic, friends who were more on the chess club side. So
You were the
very
chameleon,
different.
weren't you?
I was, I
Yeah.
really was. So, my behavior didn't change.
Yeah.
I was me.
Yeah.
So I was loud, spontaneous, funny. So when I was with that group, that was me. When I was with the other group, that was me. There was no
Mm-hmm.
change in my behavior, in the way that I acted towards others. So that's kind of what we try to look for whenever we are constantly interacting with our students, with our friends, with our peers, with our family.
Mm-hmm.
Like we start noticing, like, hey, he's not talking much, or that
Yeah.
person kind of sat on the other side by himself. Like, what's going on? So changes in behavior of the person itself. Like, what behaviors have they changed that doesn't make them who they are anymore? One
Mm-hmm.
of the signs is when students or family members, peers, any individual changes their clothing from something that you saw them wearing, like short sleeves, jeans, and more appropriate to the weather. And now all of a sudden you constantly see them wearing like sweaters or
Or
long
hoodies.
sleeve shirts, regardless of the temperature outside. And this is something new. So now you have to think about, well, are they adapting a new style? Or, is something else
Yeah.
going on that can be more alarming? Like, what is this change? And one of the other symptoms that can be seen a lot when it comes to depression and anxiety, which are the ones that we mainly see with the youth, is the lack of sleep, or the constant, either the lack of sleep, not sleeping well, falling asleep in class when they didn't fall asleep in
Mm-hmm.
class, or you just kind of see them zoning in and out when they typically don't do that. And this is something that you've observed for days consecutively. Like, it's that
Mm-hmm.
change, because yes, once in a while we may have a rough night where we don't sleep, so our behavior may be a little bit off. But if you notice this behavior being constant for at least a week, then
Uh-huh.
it's kind of like, okay, this is becoming something, their new normal. Let me approach this person and say, hey, what's going on? Like, I've been noticing that you look a little bit more tired lately. Did you hurt yourself, or what's
Yeah.
going
So,
on? And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to backtrack real quick. So, when you said that someone's changing their style and they're starting to wear long sleeves and it's 100 degrees outside, what emotional disorder, or what would you think is going to happen, or what's your concern with that? Give the listeners an idea of where your head went when a student normally wears shorts and a shirt and all of a sudden is wearing hoodies all the time in 100-degree weather.
Yeah. Especially in the valley where you're located. You know.
yes,
312
so
degrees.
so one of the things that went to my mind is self-harming.
Yeah.
That is the main thing that we see youth who are self-harming, and they don't want to call any attention towards them.
So they wear
They
baggy clothing to kind of hide and disguise and camouflage.
Mhm. And it doesn't have to be baggy. It could just be that if you usually saw them with like normal, t-shirts that,
Yeah.
show their
Temperature
arms, and
appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, they start wearing long sleeves or things that cover most of their arm. Or, for example, some individuals, depending on where they self-harm, if they used to wear shorts, now all they wear is jeans.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So those kinds of change in clothing can also be, kind of like a warning sign, like, hey, it's really hot outside and they never wear clothing like this. Like, you know, what's
Now,
going on?
is your specialty in adolescence and like, in like the youth, or do you deal with a wide variety? You deal with 40, 50-year-old people all the way to teenagers and prepubescent, youth?
So I get to see everybody.
Okay.
So I see from the youth all the way to our triadic, sorry,
Okay.
not triadic, but our geriatric population, which
Okay.
is anybody over the age of 65.
Okay.
Based on my previous jobs, I've worked more with the youth. So
Okay.
that's where I've become more closely, I see the youth a little bit more at home, especially because I have a teenage brother.
Okay.
So
Are you
I've
always analyzing him though? Are you like,
yes,
keeping an eye on your brother?
yes, and
Let me see
I
what
can
kind of
tell.
hoodie you're wearing today.
And that's one of the things that he never wears hoodies unless it's cold outside. So
But
if
then he
his
never wears it because if you're living in the valley, it's never
It's
cold.
not cold ever.
Yeah, exactly.
it is not. And one of the things that, I always joke around with him is when he's in his room all day, I go open his door. He's like, "Are you okay? Because you've been in here for so long." He's like, "Yeah, I'm just had a long day." I was like, "Okay, but just know I'm here if you need to talk." And then I'll close his door. Um,
So
but
would that be a red flag, kind of being reclusive and not coming out and just kind of keeping to yourself? Would that be considered a red flag if normally they're out running around?
yes, it can be a red flag. It's that, change in behavior where they're always playing video games, they're always, texting, or you see a pattern that you say, oh yes, that person is always outside, that person's always playing video games, that person is always reading, that person is always on their computer. And out of
Yeah.
nowhere, you just see that change where they're in their room, you go check on them and they're just laying down, or they're not doing what they normally do. They start isolating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that can also be, a red flag, a sign like, hey, like we're what's going on, like how come you're in your room, like, or even their facial expressions, or if they start becoming irritable more often than not. And again, that is a hit or miss with the youth, because again, if they're going through puberty, that's going to be one of the things that we see a lot, where they have their bursts of irritability and whatnot. But still, not just assuming, right? That's where we're going with
Yeah.
it. Like not just assuming that, oh, it's because you're going through a growth spurt, or oh, it's because you're going through puberty. It could be that, but it doesn't hurt to ask, like, hey, no, are you okay? Like, what's going on?
I'm
Like, talk to
fine, thanks. It was a call. No, I'm
This
just
is kind of
messing
like
with
our therapy session too. So we kind of get some stuff out
I
of
knew
this.
what you were saying. I coughed at the most opportune time, so I had to just pull that joke out. Yeah. So
So what
we got about 5 more minutes left, but go ahead and go. What was your question, Chris?
I just wanted to ask about like risk taking behaviors. Is that, changing the amount of risk in being a child changing their behaviors and taking more
Yeah,
risk? Is that
that's
kind
a
of a red
great.
flag as well?
That's a really great question. A kid that's just more conservative, and now all of a sudden he's jumping off train bridges and stuff into the river. Like, what's that saying? What's that about?
yeah, so that one is a little bit more, that does sound concerning, especially if they are putting themselves at risk, right? It could be those impulsivity that comes in, where they feel that they're invincible, that they can do whatever they want because nothing's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
There is a fine line between being a risk taker, like a healthy risk taker, where you know that there's a possibility of getting hurt, so you find preventative measures to make sure that if whatever you're trying to do doesn't go well, there isn't anything around for you to get more hurt, versus someone who says, oh look, I'm gonna go up on the roof and try to jump off to the inflatable or something like that.
Yeah.
It's that
Okay.
disconnect of uh, thinking like, hey, you're being very impulsive right now to trying to jump without seeing if you're gonna
Now,
break your leg, your neck, or end up in the hospital for that type of behavior. So that is also that is also a red flag, right? And
no, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to cut you off real quick because what is the difference between being impulsive, right? And just being plain stupid? Because And the reason why I say this, because we live in a world now where everything has the ability to be recorded, and
Good
going
point.
viral and being the next TikTok sensation or whatever it is it plays into these kids' heads. Like they don't want to work. They just rather be like, I'm going to be a YouTuber or a TikTok star, and I'm just going to make money off of, my whatever. Where is that fine line to where it's like, hey buddy, like I'm going to crawl up on this roof and jump onto this inflatable because that might give me some views and some likes and some shares, right? Like,
That's a good
again,
point.
how do you differentiate between this kid's got a real issue and he's having problems and we need to address it, where this kid has an issue and we need to find him help to get him, back on track, so to speak.
And that's funny you mention it because my brother watches a lot of those YouTubers who would do these
Yeah.
stunts and whatnot. And some of the videos that I've seen, behind the scenes, they prep for this stuff.
They
It's
prep
not,
for
and
accidents.
they prep for this stuff. So they're like, hey, make sure that if I get hurt, you call 911 right away. They have a plan as to,
Yeah.
they know they're going to do something that is like a risk where they can get hurt, but they have that plan where like, as soon as I get hurt, you see me not moving, you call 911 or you call my
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, everybody wants to be on ridiculousness, right? So,
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's that fine line where the person who's impulsive is not going to wait for the camera. It's a thought and they act on it. There's no time to
good point.
record. There's no time
Yeah.
to, think about it. It's like, oh, that looks fun. I'm going to do it. And they go and do it. Like they don't have that extra voice that's telling them, hey, that may be a bad idea. Like, don't
Yeah.
do it. It's
Yeah.
just kind of like, I'm going to do it. And here we go. And they jump or
Yeah.
they splurge or, they just
Whatever
because
they
they,
do. Yeah.
yes. And
Yeah.
and that is where that's the fine line, right? Because others, if you have time to record it, you are thinking of the pros and cons.
Yeah.
Someone who is going to be very impulsive, they don't think, they don't wait for the camera, they just do it. If people catch it on camera, it's because they were recording and they so happen to move the camera to see that happening.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
Makes a okay.
That was a good
Oh,
question.
wow. Yeah. Wow. Johanna, you are by far one of my favorite guests, and I'm so thankful that you came on this week. And you're welcome back anytime you want to come back, and we can talk about, we can have these debates all day long if you want.
Yeah, we can do a part
I
two
am
of this.
ready. I know I
Yeah.
said I was nervous at first, but this was a very great experience, and
Yeah,
I'm
you
gonna
did
go
great.
back and listen since season 1 to see who else he told this to that they were by far his
Oh
best.
no.
Busted.
No.
Yeah, you did very good.
I do not throw that out very often. So you'll go back and check the receipts. I don't say that to everybody. So
No, you
but I
definitely
think you did a
enjoyed
great
having you
job.
on. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I want to give a big shout out to Palms Behavioral Health in Harlingen, Texas, as always, always
sure.
providing us with some great people coming on the show. Always thank you to them.
Johanna, you're welcome back anytime, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Take care, guys.
See you next week, guys.
Take care and see you next week.
Like, we weren't supposed to come up with something this clean. Like, something happened